So this is going to be episode 1. I'm not quite sure how I'm actually going to start this, to be honest. I've done various different sort of shows and kind of podcasts in the past, and this is one I've been thinking about for a long time. And I've kind of got it structured in my head, but I don't know how I'm going to start it. So I guess I'll just kick off with what is going to be episode 1. So this is Entrepreneur Life with me, Joel Campbell, and I'm an entrepreneur. So yeah, Entrepreneur Life, the whole kind of concept of this podcast and this video cast and this show really is to share my experiences as an entrepreneur, my experience as a businessman, and how that's unraveled, I guess, over the last decade really. I mean, that's kind of it, how it's unraveled over the last decade. And I've got no kind of strategy, if you will, about exactly how I'm going to approach this. I'm going to be incredibly open, incredibly honest. I'm going to say things in this podcast that are certainly going to get me into trouble, without a doubt. That, you know, I'm going to have people turning around and say that they're not happy with things I've said or things I've shared and stuff like that. But I think that's important because I don't really have anything to hide in that sense. So I'm going to try and open it up as much as I can, and just go through that. So the way I am going to framework or structure this slightly is today's episode. So episode 1 is going to be, I'm going to talk about me. I'm going to talk about some of the things that drive me, some of the things that have got me to kind of where I am. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the pitfalls and some of the positives and stuff like that. I won't go into too much depth, but I am going to concentrate more about me, and I think that's a really good place to start on episode 1. And then as we go through this and as more happens and transpires, and I start discussing more things, the next kind of shows will start to create themselves effectively. And some of that will be off things that I talk about, and some of that will be hopefully off things that people are commenting on or questions they're asking, things they'd like to know. So that's kind of how I'm going to do it. I keep checking my watch to make sure that the camera's still recording, because it's really annoying when you're chatting for 20 minutes and you look down and you find out if you stopped recording 8 minutes ago, and stuff like that. So that's kind of what we're going to do. That's how it's going to work. I'm trying not to waffle too much. So I guess let's just crack on. I knew I wanted to run my own company from a very, very young age. I think I knew that I wanted to run my own business from around the age of 6 or 7. And there was a very specific moment that I remember in my past that actually helped me to get there, or certainly kind of started me on that journey. And so I'm just finding a pen, because I get a pen and some paper so I can write down some of the things that I talk about, so I can think about future shows as we go. And then you've got my uninterrupted attention. So yeah, I guess I was 7 years old, and I can still remember it. I was driving from the small village where I grew up with my mum, and she was driving to a small local town nearby, and we went past a petrol station, like a small like kind of garage really, and it had a little cafe next to it, kind of something that looked like it belonged to an American Horror Story really. And we drove past it, and I just randomly went, "Hey, I'm going to own that garage one day." And my mum was like, "You what?" And I was like, "I'm going to own that garage one day." And she was like, "Okay, fair enough." And I guess that's where the journey began for me. But that's kind of how it's moved forwards. And I've always thought of that garage, and I drive past it still on occasions now. And I look at it, I'm like, "Oh, that's the garage I was going to buy." But I come from one side of my family, my mum's side of my family, is very kind of business orientated, in the sense of they have run their own companies. My mum and my aunt ran their own dancing school for a number of years. They're professional dancers, and then they started their own dancing school. I remember her doing that all throughout my childhood. She would, drop me off at school, and then she would prep classes and teach and stuff like that, and I'd get picked up, and then she'd be teaching in the evenings, and then I can remember being at home, and we might have dinner, or I'd be like watching some TV, and she'd be there, and she'd then be doing the cashing out effectively, because back in those days, everything was paid for in cash and checks. So she'd be doing the accounts and things like that, and doing registers, and I guess doing marketing and enrolling new students. So I just always remember my mum running her own business. So that I saw from as far back as I can remember. And my grandparents, they ran their own companies relatively successfully. They had some failures, definitely. So I guess entrepreneurship and business has probably always been in my blood. But interestingly, the other side of my family, my dad's side of the family, much more traditional in the sense of, educations, colleges, universities, jobs, careers, and sort of retirement like that, and very kind of risk adverse. My dad's very sort of safe, and although he's very proud of what I've done and what I've created, I know that when I started one of my companies, my dad said that he just didn't think I really, had I kind of thought it through, was that the way I wanted to go? It seemed like a lot of stress, a lot of pressure, not a lot succeeds. And he did say to me a few years later, he was just like, I just couldn't have done that. He was just like, you just so much risk. And that really kind of said it all, that, two different sides of a coin is kind of how I grew up. And I guess that's probably allowed me to have a reflection on both sides. But I'm a really strong believer, a massive, massive firm believer, that entrepreneurship, it's in your DNA. It's ingrained in your DNA. It's part of who you are. It's not something you can learn. It's not something you can become. It's something that you are. And I'm going to write that down as a show topic. I'm going to put these down as show topics, and I think that I'm going to write entrepreneurs. My spelling is awful. I'm going to write entrepreneurs are born, not made. And I'm going to pick that up on a show at a later date. But that's one of the things that I really strongly believe in. That entrepreneurs are born, they're not made. Business people, they're made. There's a difference between an entrepreneur and a business person. And I count myself as both. But fundamentally, first and foremost, I'm an entrepreneur. This is Entrepreneur Life with me, Joel Campbell, and I'm an entrepreneur. So that's kind of where that began, really. And then for years I knew I wanted to run my own company. I didn't know what I wanted to do it in. When I was the age of 12, I think it was, I guess the spark sort of kicked off again. I remember being at Glastonbury Festival with my dad's, and I was with a few friends, and we were basically wandering around, just as you do as kind of 12-year-olds at Glastonbury. If you've been to Glastonbury, it's an amazing festival. It's unbelievable. It's out of this world. Sorry, I'm just drinking some tea. I know I'm choking on it. It is out of this world. And when you're 12, and my parents had always let me have quite a lot of room to wander and to roam, because we grew up in a small village in the 80s and the 90s, so it was very safe. So I'd always been given a big free rein with my friends. And anyway, we're at Glastonbury Festival, so that was exactly the same thing. I was just allowed to go off and do my own thing at the age of 12 and wander off. So me and my friends had gone off, and we came across these two guys, stoned out of their tits, completely off their fucking nut. And they were basically, they were there as promotion guys for Kickers. I don't know if you remember the shoes, Kickers. And they basically had these key rings. They were really cool. They were completely out there, but they were really cool. These like little kicker key rings that were the shape of a shoe. It was the sole of a shoe with the word kicker across it. And they were like flexi key rings. They just had the key ring attachment to it. And they were just giving them away, but they were stoned out of their heads. And I turned around to them, and I could sort of see that people were picking these things up and handing them out. People were just taking them. And I was like, you'd be able to sell those. Surely you can sell those. And I didn't know they were promotion guys. I was 12. I didn't know they were giving it out to promote Kickers. So I turned around to these guys and I said, hey, that looks really cool. It looks like good fun. Me and my friends will do that for you if you want. And these guys just thought that they'd hit the jackpot, I guess, because they were these 12-year-old kids. And I will do this job for you. A job that these guys weren't getting paid for, I imagine, but probably got free tickets to Glastonbury to do. And like I said, they probably just wanted to go and continue getting stoned and listen to music. So when I turned around and said, we'll do it for you, they passed me over this bag, and it was this, I guess, kind of like I don't know, maybe half a bin bag full of Kickers key rings. There's probably a couple of hundred in there type of stuff, and I was like, okay, cool. And they went, whoa, wait, there's more. And then out from underneath the table, they brought 2 more bin bags, and there must have been hundreds of these damn things in there, tons and tons and tons of them. And I remember just thinking like, oh Christ, okay, here we go. So these guys kind of sort of wandered off basically, and my friends kind of wandered off. My friends had gone off a little bit further at this point. I was sort of chasing after them with these 3 bin bags of key rings. And I was saying to them, look guys, we could sell these. And they thought I was nuts. They thought I was absolutely bizarre. They'd watched the entire thing that I'd seen. But they'd seen something completely different. And that was kind of what was really interesting to me. Was I'd watch these guys giving these things away and just watching people take them, looking at them and going, that looks cool, and putting it in their pocket. And I'd look at one and go, that looks really cool, I bet people would buy that. My friends, however, they saw these guys just handing these things out. They didn't see an opportunity there. And that was quite an interesting thing, I think, in itself. And maybe we'll pick that up again, but again, I think that's part of the entrepreneurs that are born and not made, and how we see things. Anyway, long story short, I persuaded my friends that we could sell these things for 20p a piece, and off they would go, basically, and that was kind of the model. So I started showing them. They didn't believe me. They're like, no, it's not going to happen. I went, look, watch. Key rings, Kickers key rings, 20p, Kickers key rings, 20p, which is kind of what you do in Glastonbury. I don't know why. So it's like a market in London somewhere. And anyway, this guy was like, oh yeah, I'll have a couple of those. And there it was, 40 pence. It took 2 key rings. My friends were like, what? And they looked at me like I'd invented fire. And I was just like, told you. And that was that. And we just went about and we just sold and sold and sold and sold and sold and sold. And for a best part of, I don't know how long, but for a good couple of hours, we just blitzed these key rings out in a group, but like surrounded across a space with us all sort of near each other. And we just blitzed these. And by the end, we got to the end of it, we made like a few hundred quid. We'd done really bloody well, 20p's, it was crazy. And we ran out of stock, and we went out of business. And it was just like the most disappointing thing ever. It was the highest of highs and the lowest of lows in that few hours, from coming up and seeing an opportunity, building a business, getting my stock, recruiting my staff, training them in doing sales, watching it be successful, holding the money in my hand, running out of stock, and then the business folded. And it was like a few hour turnover. And I just remember that my friends were like, this is great, we've got this money, we can go spend it, this is brilliant. And that was great, don't get me wrong, it was. But again, they saw the spending of the money. I didn't think of the money necessarily. I was like, oh, now I'm really disappointed, and I had a low. Because I was like, now what do I do? And it didn't matter that I was at Glastonbury Festival. I can go and watch all these different bands play and stuff like that. I think Prodigy were on that year. It was the fact that my business had failed. It had gone under in a few hours. And what I didn't know at that time, but I know now, is that wasn't going to be my first encounter with businesses failing. Sad to say. Maybe I wish it was, I don't know. But yeah, so that was my first kind of real startup company, and I love it, and I still speak to one of those guys today. I'm still friends with one of them today, and we still sort of chat about it every now and again. But like I said, I saw it very different to how they saw it. Same situation, different perspectives. So anyway, I did then spend the next 16 years in different jobs, varying different jobs. I trained as a chef when I first left school, which I really enjoyed, but I knew I didn't want to do it as a career. But it gave me a really good fundamental skill set in terms of cooking, one that I still love and am very passionate about today. I went to Australia and lived in Australia for a year. I did a range of different sales jobs, and that was brilliant to do because I did so many different types of selling. It just gave me a really good insight into both sales and marketing and approach and communication, to so many different things like that. So that was again fundamental to my skill set. I spent time working in leisure, funny enough. It's a long time actually. I carved a career out in the leisure industry where a very successful career, in fact, where I started off as a lifeguard at the age of 20, I think it was 21 when I started as a lifeguard. And, you know, as I still say to this day with my friends I was lifeguards with and to my wife, I saved lives. I made a difference. Didn't jump in the pool once, but that's neither here nor there. And I was a lifeguard for a number of years. And I went through some really difficult times at that point as well, which I won't go into too much now. But I suffered really bad anxiety. I was off work for you know, a good few weeks, if not a couple of months. I really struggled. I had full-blown panic attacks where I would just pass out. I couldn't leave the house. It was horrendous. It was awful. And that's probably another one to pick up another point. So I'll make a note of that for a show. Actually, I'm just going to write anxiety. I'm going to spell it wrong. I'm going to write panic attacks. And I'm going to write being in your own brain. So that's going to be another show. That's cool. So anyway, so I was going through that, and I did, very fortunately, I worked very hard, and I had a lot of support around me from both my partner, from my family, from my friends, and I overcame that. And when I overcame that, what I was able to do then is start working in the gym. So I embarked on a fitness career and became a gym instructor. And all through this time, I was learning. I still knew, fundamentally, I wanted to run my own company. I would say to people, when they would talk about what they want to do, what you're going to do when you're older and stuff like that, bearing in mind I was like 24 at this time, I think, 23, 24. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to run my own company. I'm going to run my own company. I just don't know what I'm going to do yet. And I've been saying that for years. I'm going to run my own business. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm going to run my own business. I just don't know what I'm going to do yet. And some people thought I was fine, other people thought I was mad. My mum, actually, funny enough, was just like, he'll just find his thing. At some point, it will just click and he'll find his thing, and that'll be that. And my dad, I think, was just very happy that I had a solid job. So that was kind of all good, really. Anyway, I trained as a fitness instructor, and I loved that. I was really passionate about that, really engaged in that. And I then trained as a personal trainer, and I taught classes. And I was into fitness in a decent way. I had a good understanding of it, good fundamentals. And I started working in the gym. I stopped being a lifeguard. I was working in the gym, and then I became a gym manager, or duty manager, if you will, in the leisure centre where my responsibility was the gym. So I really enjoyed that, and I did that for about just under a year. It was about 9-10 months, and an opportunity came up to take over a leisure centre. We're still at the same company. We had 17 sites, but working for the council, funny enough, and an opportunity came up to take over a leisure centre, and I went for the job. And I got it, and I think I was 24, I must be 24, 25 at the time, sort of transitioning between the two, and I got it, and I was amazed. I was running my entire own leisure centre, and I did that for a year, and on one hand I was incredibly successful. I had amazing figures. I mean, the site was failing when I took it over, so you could argue the only way it was up, or burning down. But I did huge things with it in the first year. We went from a deficit, I think it was about £70,000 deficit, to a £17,000 profit in the first year. So like nearly a £90,000 swing, which was unheard of in council-operated leisure centres. We had the largest increase in Quest, which is like a kite mark, if you will, for leisure, where again we went from like a 52 all the way up to a 76, I think it was. So it had huge increases, and it was really good. It was very, I did really, really well in that first year, and my bosses loved me, and I got lots of pats on the back, I got lots of praise. Oh my God, look at this guy! He's a rising star. He's great. He's going to be brilliant. He's going to set the world on fire, which I am. But the downside of that was I was an awful manager. My staff hated me. I mean, properly hated me. And I just didn't care. And I guess I was probably, I guess I didn't notice as much maybe because I had all the success, all the praise of the success, if you will. So therefore, it felt like I was doing a great job because everyone was telling me I was doing a great job, but my staff hated me. So anyway, and I'll talk more about that, I think, probably at another point maybe. And there's lots of things that happened in there. There was There was a lot of time that I spent in taking drugs and stuff like that, and drinking. So there was a heavy amount of abuse that I put my body through as well in my 20s. And I'll go into that at another stage. I'm not going to do it now. And again, there's more to talk about a lot more to talk about in that job that I was in, where I ran my own leisure centre, because it was at that point that Emma and I were pregnant. Well, she was pregnant, not me, obviously, with our first child. And we went through a really difficult pregnancy where Emma was really sick, the baby was really sick, and she was born prematurely, and unfortunately she survived for 31 days before she passed away. And Emma and I were both very young at the time. We were trying to deal with that individually, we were trying to deal with it as a couple. We both had our own careers. Emma was a psychologist working in behavioural change programs with sex offenders in a prison, so she had a really big, heavy career. I was trying to carve my career out as well, and we'd gone through this horrendous time over sort of a 7-month of really intense, heavy emotional time. And at the end of that, we lost our daughter, and it was just, everything was kind of ripped away from us in that sense. And one thing that was really good in that time was our employers were so supportive, and I remember my bosses at the leisure centres were just so supportive throughout the whole thing. I remember them just saying to me, when I had to make this phone call, sorry, it's quite difficult, I'm actually getting quite emotional sort of just speaking about it, but I remember making the phone call to my boss, who was the sort of operations manager across 17 sites type of stuff, and I had to tell him that our daughter was going to pass away. She hadn't even passed away at that point, but we knew it was going to happen. And I just remember he couldn't even speak himself, and he was just so apologetic. And he said, "Look, whatever you need, however long, whatever you need, just take the time. You'll get paid. The money's not a problem. Just whatever you need. Just you and your wife. We weren't married then, but just you guys, just whatever you need." And I just remember that was so powerful for me, and they really paid that forward. Anyway, I'll move on, and I'll come back to that again at another point, I'm sure. But this isn't a counselling session; it's a podcast for entrepreneurs. Anyway, we went on, and I moved out of the leisure centre management job because we were transitioning out of the council and into a leisure trust. So the opportunity came up for me to take on a centralised role, working across 13 leisure centres, driving forward the gyms. So there I was 20, I think I was 27 by this point, 26, 27, flying through my career, and I'd become this area manager effectively across 13 sites, where I was looking very specifically at the fitness suites, which was the biggest income generator, and supporting the sites in terms of driving that forwards. Needless to say, I, again, wasn't very popular with the staff, which ended up being a bit of my downfall in the sense because they didn't like me, and they kind of got together and complained, and that sort of kind of ousted me, and there weren't really enough results in the world to negate 8 leisure centre managers being very unhappy with me, shall we say. So that didn't go so well. We just have some tea. Anyway, from there, what happened off the back of that was I basically decided that I was at a point where I was ready to start my own company, and I'd found this idea. I'd been working with a company through my leisure connection, basically, or I'd been working with this company, I should say, before I made the decision to start my company. I've been working with these guys in America through the fitness side of things in the business I was working in, so in the leisure centres. And we were doing some really cool programs with activity tracking. So this is long before Fitbit hit the UK. This is back in the days of Nike Plus. And this company called FitLinks had made this really cool little activity tracker. You put it on your shoe and it tracks your activity. And it could tell whether you were walking, running, cycling, hopping, skipping, what you would do, how much activities, tracks your steps, your calories, your distance and your time. And that fed back basically to an online portal, if you will. It wasn't an app back then, it was just a raw database of files and data. and we could collect the data and we could sort of present it. So we were kind of running trials. I designed these trials to run in schools because I was like, well, this is a really cool way of engaging kids that don't go to the gym. It's just everyday. For me, it was everyday activity. What I'd been doing for the last few years was targeting the top 6 to 12% of the population, the fitness seekers, the decision makers that had already gone, I'm going to get fit, I'm going to join a gym, and I'm going to go regularly. So they're health connected as it would be. What I was interested in though was the other side of the spectrum, the 88% of people that weren't connected to fitness, that wouldn't come to gyms. I'd spent a lot of time trying to market to these people to get them into the gym, and I realised that actually I was trying to sell them a product they just didn't want. So I was looking at this, and I was looking at this sort of mass population kind of model and thinking about how we could make this work, and I came up with this concept of, we could build this into a really cool app similar to Facebook. We could connect activity and communication and challenges and engagement and wrap it around a reward system, like a point system, like Tesco's club card points effectively. So, you do 1,000 steps, you get 10 club card points. And then every time you're walking, you get money off your shopping. And to me, it just made absolute sense. So I built this into a business package, and I took it to the CEO at the time, and I said, hey, look, clearly we're having trouble in my job, clearly people aren't happy, obviously this isn't going well. I said, and clearly we're going to have to, this is going to have to change. I said, but I've come up with this idea from this project we've been working on with the schools, and this is it. And I delivered them a small business plan. I said, what I'd like you to do is invest £70,000 in this idea, and let me build this app with these developers, let me bring in this technology, and let me target schools and businesses. I want to target companies, I want to target big companies, so we can get big scale populations in. And I was like, and there's a cost to it, but they're not going to come to the gyms. And I remember him saying, and it's really interesting, but I remember this guy saying to me at the time, he was like, well, how are you going to make money? And I was like, I don't really know, but that wasn't what was driving me. And I was like, I'm not 100% sure. I said, but we're going to have stacks of data. I was like, we'll have so much data. I'll be able to tell you how much activity people do in different businesses, in different work environments, in different areas where they live, different age groups. I said, I'll be able to just give you reams and reams and reams of data. And he turned around to me and he said, don't be silly, you can't sell data. You can't make money off data. And I was quite naive still. And I was like, oh shit, that can't be right, man. There must be a way of making this work. And the very next day, Facebook published that I think they just made $1 billion in data. And I just sat there and I was like, there it is. That's the model. So I went to my CEO and I said, hey, $1 billion in data, that's the model, that's where we should go. And he was like, no, they make it in ads. That's not how it's going to work, like it won't work type of stuff. So anyway, I'm kind of paraphrasing a bigger conversation. I'm sure he remembers it slightly differently. But the bottom line came to the point of he didn't want to do it. And I get that. I understand why. He's not an entrepreneur for a start, but I understand why. So I turned around and said, well, look, I want to go forward with this. I want to do this. And a few weeks later, I handed in my notice and I left. And I told them this is what I was going to do. I was very open about it, and they were like, cool, no worries, crack on. And that was it. I had my idea for my very first company. And at the age of 28, I think I started around my birthday, so around the end of May, when I was 28, I started Step Success Limited, my very first proper limited business. And that was it. I was on the road. I chucked in a couple of grand that sort of Emma and I sort of had squirreled in our bank accounts. I went to the bank and I borrowed £18,000 to get me started, and that allowed me to buy some stock and allowed me just to kind of get things moving. It was just me. And then I bought a business partner because I knew I had to build a website, build a small application, like a web-based application. So I knew a guy, and this is kind of one of my first big mistakes, I guess. Because I knew a guy who built websites and stuff, nice enough guy. We don't talk anymore, he hates me. But anyway, so I knew this guy and he had a web company. So I said, look, I've got this idea, I'd be really interested in you guys, in you building the website type of stuff. thing is, don't really have any money, or I've got a small amount of money, but I kind of need it for this thing over here. Would you be interested in taking a percentage of the business instead of like payment for your services? And he was up for that, so he ended up with 30% of the business. Here's my first lesson for you. If you're going to go into business with somebody, be very, very careful about the percentage rates. There's certain numbers that make a big, big difference. One of those numbers is you'll expect 51%. Obviously, it gives you voting rights, gives you majority voting rights. You can pretty much kind of push through what you want to push through to a point. The next number, however, 75%. I didn't know this, and I ended up giving away, or not giving away, but selling out 30% of my company. And that came to bite me in the ass, big style down the line. So anyway, started running this company, built the website, it was a really good website, built logos, did some videos, got it out there, started moving it. And I started picking up clients. I picked up Network Rail, I picked up Tesco's, I picked up fucking Bupa, like, you know, some good sized companies. Picked up about 5 or 6 schools, a couple of universities, a couple of gyms, and things were going okay. Everything though was on a trial basis. These were all concepts to prove, so it was all kind of early stages, no big contracts per se, but big companies we were working with small groups of people to prove concept. And I was very open with people. I remember sitting in a meeting with Network Rail and sitting with a couple of the company directors, and I was talking about what we were doing and how we were going to grow this and how we were going to do that. And I've always talked in the we sense, because in my mind, it wasn't just me. There was this big company. We were a multi-million-pound business. We just hadn't generated the multi-million pounds. And there was multiple teams. We just hadn't hired any other people. So in my mind, that's kind of how it was, this big thing. And I was saying to them, well, we've done this, and we're going to do this, and we're setting this up, and we're going to do this for you, and we'll do this, and this is how this will work. And they turned around to me and said, can we just check one thing? And I was like, yeah. And they were like, this we you talk about, is there lots of people behind this, or is this just you? And this thought went straight through my head of like, do I tell them the truth or do I lie? And I made the decision right there and then to be completely upfront. I didn't feel any reason I had to lie to these guys. I had nothing to prove. So I went, no, it's just me. And they went, okay, carry on. And they were fine with that. And I remember sort of thinking to myself as well, after the meeting, I was driving home from Coventry, I was like, what would have happened if I said, oh no, there's loads of us, and I bullshitted it, I blagged it? Would they have been okay with that? Would they not have been okay with that? Would they have called me out on it, and then that would have done the deal down? I don't know. I'm not sure, but I made the decision to be straight with them, and I think that's really important. You're just straight up with your clients. And anyway, the company ran quite nicely for sort of the first 6 months or so, sort of building and developing, and slowly I was kind of running out of money to get it going, and then my business partner felt it would be good if we got a PR company involved, and the PR company, I never worked with a PR company before in my life, I didn't really know what they did type of stuff, kind of thought it was marketing but wasn't sure. So they came up with this great strategy, and I remember going up to their offices and they're showing off all these great things, these great ideas, showing me these big cutouts, these magazine articles, what I've done for all these clients. I was just bowled over, like, these guys are amazing, oh my God, everyone's going to hear about this, they're going to get it everywhere, which is what they're telling me, and it's just going to go, just boom, I'm going to be a multi-millionaire, this is great, and business is fucking easy. Anyway, their cost was 12 grand, and I didn't have anywhere near that much money left, so I went to a different bank, and I borrowed 12 grand to be able to pay the PR company. And basically what the PR company then did was they pitched this product to consumers. And the trouble was we didn't have a consumer facing product. We had a group product built for corporates, built for businesses with hundreds of employees, not a consumer product like Fitbit. And we couldn't deliver what they were pitching. And actually they couldn't even get it into magazines really. They couldn't get it anywhere. And we just basically just pissed 12 grand up the wall and got nothing from it. And that was really kind of the really big turning point then for the business. It started going downhill, and some of the concepts, it wasn't that they weren't proved. We were kind of okay on that standpoint, but the schools weren't able to fund it, and some of the smaller businesses weren't, and the gyms didn't get there, and Network Rail just dragged on for a couple of years. It was that golden goose that never laid an egg. And yeah, and I guess the other big thing that I just didn't realise until too late, because at one stage I was like, well, we need to build a better app. I was like, this is the problem, it's the app. We need to build a better app. So I then got a developer in to build a new app, and that cost another 18 grand. So I borrowed that again, and I borrowed all this kind of money type of stuff, and I made all these commitments to different places, and we just weren't making anything. It was just going bad. And I remember having to have a phone call with the HMRC at one point and explain to them I couldn't pay the VAT because I'd spent the money, and it was just bad. And Emma and I at this point were starting to now not have enough money for food, so we were living on pasta, just like dried fucking pasta, or just like pasta, plain pasta. We couldn't even afford cheese or pesto, so it was just like boring pasta day after day. And yeah, it was sort of going south then by that point quite quickly, and yeah, what happened kind of next was really gut wrenching. Was the Network Rail deal kind of, it fell apart on me in the sense of somebody new started who'd actually worked for Nuffield before and designed Nuffield's health systems, and when he started, he decided he was going to put everything out to tender. And we just didn't stand a chance against the Nuffields of this world. We just didn't stand a chance, and Nuffield picked up a massive contract from Network Rail that we'd spent 2 years embedding the behaviour and the culture, and that was gut wrenching. And one thing I hadn't realised along this whole journey was I always thought I was running a health company, and I wasn't. I was running a technology company, and the difference between a health company and a technology company, straightforward. A health company costs money to run, definitely. Money to invest and to grow. A technology company costs a shitload of fucking money to grow and to run. And I was out of my depth, didn't know what was going on, and the business came crashing down. And it came crashing down with, a big chunk of debt. We were talking about what ended up being £83,000 worth of debt in that company, and nothing to show for it. Fortunately, I'd been speaking to another business up in London who I'd done a little bit of work with, a PLC, a healthcare PLC. And at that time, the CEO was going through a journey of acquisition, buying other businesses, folding them into their mix, and building this huge, massive health system to go to the big private companies and then to hit the NHS with and do some of the public health contracts. And he really liked what we had. It was unique and stuff like that. He could see the opportunity for it, which was great. And as the business was failing, my business partner and I, we'd fallen out massively. He couldn't understand why it wasn't succeeding. I was trying to explain it. He couldn't get it. And we were just arguing. We just were at loggerheads and really not on speaking terms. We had all this debt, and it was just failing massively. And at that time, I had bailiffs then banging on the door because they wanted to collect the money for this debt, and we were living on pasta, and we had people trying to claim to take the cars. And it was just the car, in fact, this beaten up Citroen Picasso that we had, and it was just awful time. And this company, this business called Ultrasys, this PLC, almost came along with a bit of a sort of a knight in shining armour and said, "Hey, look, we will buy your company for £1, and we will take over all of the debt." And I was like, this weight was lifted, this huge stress was just taken off me. I was like, oh my God, this could work. And they went, "And we'd love you to come work with us for a year at least and transition this business into ours and see what you can do and maybe stay longer," type of stuff. "We'd love you to come do that." And I was like, this is amazing. This is gonna work, and it's gonna kind of save me. So I rang up my business partner. I was like, "Hey, look, I know we're not speaking. I know you're pissed off. I'm pissed off. It's all shit." I said, "But I've got this debt," and it was all on a director's loan as well, which was on me. So all of it was set to a director's loan for me, and guaranteed. And I said, "Look, I've got this company. They're willing to take the company, but this company is willing to buy our business for £1, take all the debt, and just move it." He went, "What's in it for me?" I went, "Well, nothing." I was like, they're going to pay us £1, so technically 30p. But if you want the whole quid, you can have the whole quid. And he was like, "No, I don't want to do it." I was like, "But the company's dead. It's going nowhere. It's doing nothing. It's stopped. It's insolvent. It's failed. If we don't do this, I'm going to be saddled with £83,000 worth of debt." And his words never, ever have left me. And he turned around and said, I'd rather see you with the debt than I would see you go free and clear. And I just thought to myself, what a prick. Because I hadn't done anything wrong, I just hadn't succeeded. And I just couldn't believe that somebody would do that to someone else, like so hard. So he dug his heels on, and this is where I learned that when you own 70% of a business, I couldn't force the sale. I wasn't able to, and I tried. He dug his heels in. What I was able to do, what I was advised to do, is I could sell the assets of the business for like 83k, for example, and then I could pay off all the debt, and we'd still have the same thing. But the company that were purchasing it weren't willing to do that, because their concern was if my business partner made a claim to say that I'd sold the assets unfairly, or it was a conflict in there because I was getting offered a job, so salary and stuff. They were too concerned. So they were like, you know what, we can't do it. What we'll do is we'll give you bottom dollar effectively on it. And they paid us $7.5 grand, I think it was, for the company assets. They kind of did a $7.5 grand, but to do that, they had to agree with my business partner to pay him £12,000 in work services that would come over the next year. So he ended up getting 12 grand out of it. 7 grand came into the business, which I paid off £7,000 worth. It was just swallowed up instantly by the overdraft, so I didn't pay off any money. And I folded the business down and was left, by the time all the interest and everything was added, I was left with £82,000 worth of debt to my name. No company, and a job that I just moved into. And I think that probably leaves me at a good point to take a break. I'm going to go pick up my daughter from a gymnastics session, so I will pick this up probably, I'll pick up the next sort of 20 minutes, and this will be an hour long. But yeah, that was my first kind of failing in business. I got to a point, started a company, seen some success, thought I'd made it, made so many mistakes, as lots of entrepreneurs do. But when I made my mistakes, I made them big mistakes, and ended up folded company, £82,000 worth of debts, bailiffs on the door trying to take our battered, clattered out Citroen Picasso, a new baby that we had, so we'd had our second child by this point, so a new baby. Emma and I were living off pasta. I remember us just thanking whoever it is we thank that the baby was still breastfeeding. We didn't have to buy food for the baby because we just couldn't afford it. Couldn't afford anything. Bills were mounting up, and it was just a nightmare. Really low place. And I'd had an out, and my business partner wouldn't let me. It was a dark time. And I'm going to leave it at that point, and I'll pick it back up shortly. Welcome back to part 2 of episode 1, Entrepreneur Life, with me, Joel Campbell, and I am an entrepreneur. So I just finished talking about my first company and the failure of that, and I will go into that in probably some more detail down the line or over different episodes. And the first thing you may notice if you're watching this on a video cast, I'm wearing something different, and that's because last night, Friday evening, I actually recorded the first sort of 40 minutes basically of episode 1, and I'm back in the prison today for a couple of hours. So Saturday morning, I'm just recording the last sort of 20 minutes. So it's going to be an hour-long episode. Fuck, man, this kid can talk. I've seen that on my YouTube channel before. People come in and go, this guy can talk. And I can, and I'm very happy with that. I don't mind that. It's other people that have the problem. I'm just kidding, but not really. So anyways, my company had failed, and basically that's where I was. 83k's worth of debt. It was bad times, really bad times, and it's at those points, I guess, in your life, the deepest, darkest holes that we find ourselves in. And there's loads of reasons that we find ourselves in those holes and those depths. Is where kind of, I guess, resilience and how you deal with life going forwards from that part, and that's what kind of separates us a little bit, I guess, from each other to a degree in terms of how we manage that, how we deal with it, and and the direction we choose to take. So I was working for the company that had paid the small amount of money for the business transfer. asked me to come on board, so I did, and I was getting paid a salary, and it was a good salary. It wasn't massive, but it was okay for what it was. And I was travelling up to London 4 days a week and doing a 5-day week in 4 days, basically spending 4 of those in London, staying at my sister's, sleeping on the couch. And I managed to work out, between me and my wife, we were able to work out how to put payment plans together. So we were just keeping our heads above water, paying thousands of pounds of debt back per year. And I think we worked it out, and it was about a 12, 13 year kind of plan that was going to get us back to zero. So anyway, so I was working for that company, doing that. We had a young child and stuff like that, and obviously we're developing and growing. And then in 2013, so this is kind of where we get to now. So end of 2012, I sold the bits of the business that were kind of left. And 2013, the government announced they were going to close 7 prisons across the UK, which included Shrewsbury Prison, Shepton Mallet Prison, Gloucester, Reading, Dorchester, Kingston, I think Peterhead. So yes, they announced they were closing those, and they were shortly after that, they said they were going to be selling them. And I just kind of was like, do you know what? I'd always thought that the prison, I'd been round Shepton Prison whilst it was open, and I always thought it would make a great, people would pay to go round it. And I'll talk more about that again at another point, but for now, I saw an opportunity in Shepton Mallet Prison. I thought, if we could buy this and we could turn it into a tourist attraction, and I was sure it'd be great. So I started speaking to the agents, and I got a viewing, and I went round and looked at the prison at Shepton, and got the plans and got the specs and stuff like that, and basically put together what I would do with it. And I knew that I was going to be hard pressed to beat property developers, because I could see that the way the MOJ had spun it was that they wanted it to be sold. They wanted it to go to safe pairs of hands, effectively. And again, I'll pick that up at another point when I talk about business relationships. So, do you know what, I'm going to put that down. Business relationships. I think that's a really key one. I'm going to put relationships and partnerships. See how this show's going to flow, and partnerships. So I basically put in a bid to buy the jail. Long and short of it is I wasn't successful, unsurprisingly, and and it kind of, I wasn't sure what to do next. So I thought, well, do you know what? Somebody must have bought this, and the MOJ wouldn't announce who it was. So I drew up a short list of 5 developers in the country, 5 development companies that I felt could kind of handle that size of development. So I drew up this short list, and I basically cold emailed all of them to say, hey, this is who I am. I think you might have bought Shepton Mallet Prison. Be really interested in chatting to you. You've probably got a year's journey of planning. Really like to take it over in that year's time. And one of those people was a guy called Trevor Osborne, who you probably won't have heard of, but he bought Oxford Prison and Castle, Oxford Castle and Prison, developed it into the Malmaison Hotel. A fascinating guy, into his mid-70s now, and done loads of developments in the past, and still doing developments as we speak. Anyway, dropped him an email, and he emailed back to say, yeah, well, I looked at Shepton, but I just couldn't see it working, so I didn't buy it. But what I have done is I've bought Shrewsbury Prison, and would you be interested in running that, or having a discussion about that? So that kind of opened the conversation. I met with Trevor a couple of times, had some conversations about it, and again, long and the short of it is, within I think about 5 months of chatting to Trevor, I was at Shrewsbury Prison, keys in hand, ready to make a start. And that was it. That was kind of the beginning of Shrewsbury Prison and how that prison journey all began. So we're now in July 2015. I've got a couple of kids. We've still got ourselves, I think it was £78,000 worth of debt by that point when we took over the jails, living in Somerset, still working for another company, still got, 11 years or something like that of debt to pay back, no money in the bank. I had to borrow money to put petrol in the car to drive up to Shrewsbury effectively to get the keys. And I was working a 40-hour week for another company as well, so I didn't have, I just working all hours. Anyway, took over Shrewsbury Prison and started. And I remember that we were kind of putting it together, Emma and I, we were at home, and we were putting together a website and trying to figure out how we were going to sell tickets, and and how much they were going to cost and all this kind of stuff. We had no money at all. Putting together the business insurance, putting out recruitment ads for tour guides, and trying to get all of this kind of thing going. And we got to a point where it was just like, I remember looking at it and speaking to my stepdad at the time and explaining that, you know, the first month's costs were like £15,000 by the time we paid insurance and the lease, like the rent and staffing and just all the other costs. And I just didn't have any money at all, and minus 78 grand. And he was just like, how are you going to make this work? And I was like, do you know what? I have no idea, but I believe I can. So I just carried on, head down, blinkers on, and I went for it. And we launched the tickets, and when we launched the tickets, they went out obviously on local media as well, like that. And what happened was, in the first 24 hours, we sold £17,000 worth of tickets. And I just remember sitting there with Emma, just going, I watched it, and we were watching it in 24 hours, we were just watching it tick, 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 tick. We just saw all this money coming in, and I was like, fuck, this is going to work. And I knew it was going to work, but it was that kind of realization of, fuck, this is going to work. And I was really, really pleased. It was a really proud moment for me in my life, because, like I say, Emma and I had done this together. We'd kind of built it. It was a concept, and it was going to work. And there was loads of problems that hit. I'll give you one very quick problem that hit instantly. Because I was like, cool, we can pay the insurance, we can pay the rent, we can pay the staff, we can pay the bills, we know we're good for the first month. And then PayPal, who we used as the payment gateway, message to say they were freezing our account, basically because we'd had a brand new account, and we had £17,000 arrive in it. And it was coming in payments of like 30 quid, because back then tour tickets were £15 each. So they were coming in payments of like £15, £30, £45. And PayPal just went back, this is dodgy as fuck, mate. Like, they were just like, there's no way this is a real company, no actual product, you're selling a service, £15 transactions, £30 transactions, 17 grand a day, that's something dodgy. So they froze the account, and it was weird how they did it, because what they said was, you can continue to take money, but you can't access it. And that was my next problem, was we had all this money tied up in the PayPal account. PayPal wouldn't let us draw it down. And I had to prove to PayPal it was a legitimate business with legitimate products doing a legitimate thing. So I had to go through that process, and finally I persuaded PayPal, I convinced PayPal, showcased it to you, this is what it was. And they were like, okay, well, we'll let you draw down funds. It was I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was like £500 or £300 at a time, a day, that they'd let us draw down until we built up some account, I don't know what the word is, until we built up a bit of a background for it. So they were confident that it wasn't something dodgy. And then we were trying to draw down like 300 quid a day or whatever it was to pay these bloody bills. So I could just see payroll getting closer and closer and closer. I think by this point we were kind of getting towards the end of the month, and there was like, I don't know, 4 or 5 days left. And I was like, shit, we're not going to make it. And then I just put in an automatic kind of increase to PayPal about to up our level of withdrawals, accessing cash. And they did. They upped it to like 1,200 quid or something a day, and it was just like, boom, got it, we can do it. And the business started to flow from there. Now, I'm not going to go into too much about the jail from here. That's going to be another episode, obviously. Well, it's going to be lots of episodes, because, you know, the last 6.5 years I've been running the prisons, and it has scaled, it's grown, and it's given me some of the highest of highs and some of the lowest of lows, and it's been a hell of a journey. Fucking random journey as well, a hell of a journey, and I'm still doing it day to day. It's what I do. I guess what I kind of want to get to now to finish this episode is that when I took over the prisons, you know, we were £78,000 worth of debt. So this is 2015, this is July 2015, 78k's worth of debt. And by the time we got to January 2019, so we're talking, what's that, 3.5 years, something like that, we had paid off all of our debt. Every single penny of it was paid off. And we'd grown the business significantly. It had grown significantly. We didn't have really a lot of money in our bank, but the business it owed us a bit of cash. And we found a house that we really wanted to move into up in Shrewsbury, a lovely house. So we put an offer in for this house, and And I'll talk about this at a different point. I go about things in a not normal way, as people say, normal. So we put the offer in for the house before we had the mortgage, before we knew how much money we could have or anything like that, because that was the house we wanted. And then I went and figured out how we were going to make it work financially. So we did that, and we bought this house in 2019. And funny enough, we weren't actually even in the country when we completed. We were over in New Zealand visiting Emma's parents who'd emigrated a few years before. And we did the completion and everything whilst we were away. So we actually bought a house whilst we weren't even in the country. And I'm going to kind of round this off now, because I guess the point is that this isn't a brag or a boast, it's the reality, because I've seen some real lows in my life and I've seen some real highs, and I've been in a really difficult situation emotionally, financially, physically and stuff like that. And where we are now is a very different place. So I sit here now in episode 1, and it was just over a month ago, 2nd of February 2022, if you're listening back to this, where I actually bought the jail. So I bought Shrewsbury Prison. And upon buying Shrewsbury Prison, it did change our finances drastically, because we already had a nice house. And our house is 3,500 square feet nearly, so it's not small. We've got a lovely big house. It's a lovely old listed schoolhouse in a nice village just outside the outskirts of Shrewsbury. I'm not going to give you the address. It's got a swimming pool, which is lovely. The kids love having a swimming pool. It's got a big double garage, which we've converted into a gym. So, it's kind of how people imagine. We've got a pool, we've got a hot tub, we've got outbuildings, we've got an acre of land, we've got a really big house, we've got a gym. Those kind of things that people are like, oh, I'd love to have that. And we do, we've had that, we've built that, which is great. And it's secure as well. We own a really good percentage of it. There's not a big mortgage on it particularly, and so that's brilliant. And then recently the business bought the jail, so obviously we went through that process. And upon buying the jail, what happened was our value, if you will, our wealth increased exponentially, because up until the purchase of the jail, we were basically running on a license, if you will, which meant that the company valuation couldn't be realised, because it didn't matter that the business might have been worth X amount. The fact was, because our license was only for a fixed period of time, nobody would have ever bought the business, because there was always a potential it would have closed a couple of months later because of not having a building. So when we purchased the building, what it did was it took the value of the building and released the value of the business and compounded them together, and then gave us a final valuation. And the purchase it did a number of things in terms of stability and stuff like that. But what it did was it didn't make me £1 million. It didn't make me £2 million, and it didn't actually even make me £3 million. It took me from where I was, and in terms of my personal value, if we want to count it like that, we're going to talk about money, it's a bit crude, we'll talk about that very quickly. It took me from probably having maybe in the region of about £400,000 or £500,000 of kind of valuation, I guess, if you want, to my net worth. And upon doing the jail, it then escalated us to just under £4 million. So as I sit here talking today, if you wanted to look at my net worth, it is now £4 million with some change. And that's been a really interesting trip over the last sort of 6 years, I guess. It's been in the prisons, and we've scaled beyond jails as well now. We own 5 different companies. Yes, the majority of our businesses are in the prison tourist world, but we also own event companies and a production company and stuff. We produce this podcast. So yeah, it has grown, and it was the other day that I sort of went home, and it was about a week and a half after we'd completed on the jail, and sort of things had settled a little bit, and I just sort of sat there, and I remember going home and sitting on the floor, which I like to do on occasion, and just the realisation that I'd got to a point where my 10-year goal had been achieved from 10 years previous. We owned 5 businesses, all doing either really well or doing okay, nothing doing badly, so that's good. We owned our own properties, so we had complete control, and we're masters of our own destiny in that sense. We own our own house, you know, and it's a lovely house, really, really nice house. So that was good. We have good money in the bank personally, so that gives us sustainability and comfort in our personal lives. And talking about sort of Maslow's hierarchy here, all those things are kind of ticked off. I've got a lovely family, you know, really wonderful kids. Very, very fortunate we've got such good kids. I put it down to their upbringing and the parenting. But yeah, we've got some lovely children. I've got an amazing partner in Emma, and my wife. She's fantastic, and you know, I'll talk more about that in other episodes, I'm sure. But so that's great, and it's really nice and solid, and very happy. And then we've got a really good business structures. You know, our business has come leaps and bounds, and they're just going faster and faster and faster. We've got some really good people, really passionate, engaged people. We've got some non-passionate, non-engaged people, but you know, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Not everyone can be, you know, setting the world on fire. We've got some amazing people in our organisation, and we're financially stable. We are financially viable. I met with the bank the other day, and they were really pleased with where we are and where we're going, and you know, they want to support that growth again, and other lending partners, and you know, I've got other companies asking whether we'd be interested in investing in their businesses and stuff. So it's going the right way. And this realization kind of hit me of, fuck, I've kind of done it. I've made it to where I wanted to be, and now I can concentrate on the next goal. And it's not to say that I don't still get the shit hitting the fan daily, because I do. That's the job of a CEO, and it's part and parcel of being an entrepreneur. But where I'm going to finish this episode is on this. If you think you're an entrepreneur, or you feel you're an entrepreneur, you'll know you're an entrepreneur, or even if you're a business person, you want to make that drive, but this is specifically for entrepreneurs really. If you want to make that step, here's my, I guess, advice, or here's my thoughts on what you're going to have. You are going to experience some of the highest of highs, and you're going to experience some of the lowest of lows. And when it's low, you're going to feel like the world is caving in on you, and it is just so hard and so tough, and why am I doing all of this? And you know, you'll get the stresses and the pressures, and if you're really unlucky, you know, your mental health will dive in on you, and you'll feel physically like you just can't do it, and you know, you're going to spend hours looking at the ceiling, thinking about how you're going to pay these bills and how you're going to make this business work and all that sort of stuff. And you're going to fail. You are absolutely going to fail. It's going to happen. Don't think for 1 second you're going to just, it's all going to be rosy. It doesn't work like that. So you are going to have the lowest of lows, and you're going to need to be resilient and tough, and you're going to need to dig so deep to be able to pull through that. But you'll be able to, because you're an entrepreneur. You will make it. You will press forwards, because it's what you are. It's not what you do, it's literally what you are. It's ingrained in you, it's part of your DNA. So you'll be able to do that. And then you're going to experience the highest of highs, the euphoric, you know, it's just all working, or you secure that contract, or suddenly the viability's there, or you complete the purchase, or whatever it is, and suddenly somebody says to you, hey, do you realise your business is worth this much? And this is how much you're worth. And you'll be like, wow. And then you remember that you're not in it for the money. The money's it's a byproduct. It's lovely, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, you know, it's not part of the reason. It absolutely is. Anybody who says it isn't is, I think, lying or not being true to themselves. It is part of the process, but it's not the core reason. It's about the journey. And again, that's what sets entrepreneurs aside. It's that challenge, it's that next piece. And you're going to get those highest of highs. The key thing I think I'm finding, I'm coming to realization, I'm starting to do a lot of self-reflecting as well now, is it's about the consistency. It's about the lowest of lows, the highest of highs, but remaining consistently happy. Happiness is a constant. Euphoria and I say it with a pinch of salt, but euphoria and kind of the really hard sadness, they're not constants, they're points in time. But the happiness or the sadness is a constant, and that's where you kind of, I would suggest you need to keep it. But you're an entrepreneur and you're going to make it. You just have to believe and keep pressing forwards, whatever happens. And that's really the end of episode 1. I don't think there's a lot more to add to that. Over the coming weeks and episodes, I will talk more about all of my experiences, the things I've been through. I will spend a lot of time, no doubt, talking about the prisons, because I've learned so much from there, and it has made me a successful business person. Some people would see. It depends on how you look at success, and it's given me the platform now to move forwards and do some of the other things I want to do. So. I will talk about those. That's pretty much, like I say, episode 1. I hope you've enjoyed it. I go on a lot, I talk a lot. There's a lot of waffling in there. But yeah, I've really enjoyed it. It's a really good thing to do, and I'm really pleased that I'm going to now be able to get this podcast moving. It's been something I wanted to do for a long time, and the start, I think, of something quite special. So thank you very much for listening. This has been Entrepreneur Life with me, Joel Campbell, and I am an entrepreneur.